Good afternoon, everybody. Garland and diesel is a big no-no, and it has been replaced by Turbidor, which is an environmentally friendly replacement for Garland and diesel. Please write that down, Turbidor. Turbidor. Please write it down, Turbador. Turbidor. No more Garland and diesel, please. But I'm going to introduce my team now. I have two Groensebenza interns that will be giving my presentation on my behalf. It is Sisanda Tembani, put up your hand please. And please come stand in the square. And Ziphozonke Fikeni, thank you.
Good day, everybody. As Debbie's already introduced me, my name is Sisanda Tembani, and I'll be giving you the presentation on herbicides, government, and people. So I'll be covering the first part of the presentation, and then I'll give over to my colleague, Ziphozonke. So firstly, just to give a background on what the National Resources Management branch has done so far as far as herbicides and the control or the management of the alien invasive species are concerned. So under the Working for Water, there has been so far an allocation of, so this is basically just to show the budget allocations that have been done so far, or that have been allocated on this project so far, and also this includes projects that actually use herbicides on them. So for terrestrial projects, there's been about 1 billion budget allocation for that particular project under the Working for Water program, under Working for Water programs. And there's been aquatic weeds project, which was allocated about 42 million. Next up was the rope access project, which is mainly the high altitude project, which was allocated an amount of about 55 million. Next, it was the Emerging Species Project, which was allocated an amount of about 121 million. And then Working on Fire had about 552 million, followed by Working for Wetlands, which had 135 million rands allocated to it. Working for Water's Ecosystem Services had 80 million, and lastly, Working for Forests had about 10 million that was allocated to it. So next up, this is just a land coverage depiction to show the alien invasive species around the South African country. And with the red, green, and the light, the red, orange, and the light green areas being the areas that we are currently working on. Being the areas that we're currently working on. Sorry.
No, so on the pointer, you want the red light?
Yeah.
Oh, you want the pointer? Oh, you want the pointer, sorry.
Okay, apologies about that. So as I was saying, this is just a land coverage of the alien invasive species around South Africa, and we're having the red, the yellow, and the light green areas being the areas that we are currently working on under the National Resources Management. So NRM, or the environmental programs, has embarked on creating pesticide or herbicide policy, which is mainly trying to create some kind of guide or a way of controlling the invasive alien species, and also what herbicides or what kind of herbicides are being used in order to control the alien invasive plant that we have. And so it is the policy includes or is trying to align to the international legislation currently. And I'm just going to share a few of the legislations or the regulations that are included or that are being tried to align to the herbicide policy. First, we have the Rotterdam Convention under Annexure 3, and there's also been used the prior informed consent, which is the PICs. And the PICs mainly help countries to make informed decisions regarding the import of banned or restricted pesticides. Basically to try and create some kind of control in what herbicides or pesticides are being used on eliminating or clearing our alien invasive species. Also, there's the Stockholm Convention as part of one of the legislations, which is used to eliminate and restrict basically the use and manufacturing of the POPs. Basel Convention is also one of the legislations that the EP herbicide policy is trying to align to, and it's mainly used to, it's mainly for the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and how they get disposed. We also have the Bamako Convention of Africa, which is being used to prohibit the import of any hazardous waste. So, regarding pesticides with unmanageable risks, as we know, some of the herbicides are very extremely harsh or hazardous when it comes to human lives, and most of the time they might be effective in clearing the alien invasive species. But then there comes a question of how they impact the human lives, which mainly the people who are going to be using or applying them on the alien invasive species. So with pesticides with unmanageable risks, we have pesticides that have endocrine disrupting properties, which are in short known as the EDPs. We also have the carcinogenic and immunotoxic potential herbicides, which belong to class 1A. I'll talk more on that, on the classes or the classifications of these herbicides later in the presentation. And so basically with carcinogenic, we speak of herbicides that have the potential of causing cancer to people. Next we have highly hazardous, which are the herbicides that belong to class 1B. And we also have pesticides with frequent and severe poisoning incidents, which are known to be arsenic, basically, belonging to class 2A. So this is a depiction of 3 tables, which include how herbicides are being classified and the different classifications from, firstly, the World Health Organization. There's also classification according to groups from the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And lastly, we have the table of the harmonized system of classification and labeling of pesticides, which is mainly the JHS category classifications. So firstly, on the World Health Organization classification, as you can see, for instance, we have class 1A, which is the group or the classification for all extremely hazardous herbicides. Where the herbicides would have oral impact or effects on humans, containing about less than 5 milligrams per kg body weight. And then under class 1B, we've got highly hazardous, which would contain about 5 to 50 there, as shown. Class 3, speaking to moderately hazardous, and slightly hazardous would be under class 3, unlikely to present acute hazardous waste would belong to under category 4. Okay. Then with the Iarc classification system, we've got group 1, herbicides, which are herbicides that are carcinogenic to humans, meaning these would be herbicides that mainly are known to cause cancer to human beings, basically. And then group 2A is the group that contains herbicides that are probably carcinogenic. So the amount or the degree to which they cause cancer or have cancerous impacts are much lesser than the group 1 herbicides. And then we have those that are possibly carcinogenic to humans, so meaning these are herbicides that would have cancerous impacts on people. And then there's group 3 with not classifiable as to its carcinogenity to humans. Group 4, probably not carcinogenic. And then lastly with the GH1, which has category 1 to category 5 as well, and is classified according to its oral and dermal impacts, meaning how they would impact people if people use them and they get to inhale them. And also what impact would they have on their skin, speaking to the dermal impact on them. So the EP pesticide policy has actually moved. Initially, the World Health Organization classification was being used, but then there has been a move from the WHO classification and more of a leaning or the use of the JS. Reason being that with the World Health Organization, it's been found that it is not much clear when it comes to their labeling. For instance, you'd find a herbicide that's, they mainly use color coding to label these herbicides. So it becomes difficult for a lot of people, especially people who are illiterate, to actually understand these codes on these herbicides. And so that leads to people actually using these herbicides and end up getting cancer or having dermal or skin issues resulting from that. As opposed to the JHS classification, which is more specific and more clearer, because it uses pictograms so that when you buy a product or any herbicide product, you're able to understand exactly what maybe a red color means, a red labeling means, and what a green labeling means on a herbicide. And you actually know the exact impact or the exact dangers to expect from the use of that particular herbicide. And then on the screen, I just have an extract from the EP pesticide policy, which just shows how this pesticides are being categorized and how it's been explained on the policy day. So you'd find the trade name of the herbicide and what kind of chemical family it belongs to, and also the kind of ingredients that are contained by that particular herbicide there, and also the Iarc herbicide group code, and also the World Health Organization classification as well. So basically with these herbicides, or when it comes to this listed herbicides in the pesticide policy, these are herbicides that are safer to use, and this is mainly where one would have to consider their mitigation processes when using these herbicides, or considering to use a particular herbicide to treat alien invasive plants. So the National Resources Management Pesticide Policy is a policy that has basically been updated in 2012, and which is continuously being updated and reviewed to this day. And then it covers all herbicides used, and mostly these are herbicides that are considered to be much safer and effective in using them. And then certain herbicides are not contained in the NRM pesticide policy. The reason being is that these are pesticides that have been proven to be carcinogenic and dangerous on human lives. And an example of that would be MSMA. It's totally not included in the pesticide policy because it's known to have a carcinogenic impact on people. And then we've got biopesticides, preferred, which are also included in the policy. And then there's also agreed control measures which are included in the policy as well. So the National Environmental Management Act, which is basically the act that is also aligned or included in the pesticide policy, it encourages the implementation of comprehensive pesticide reduction strategies. So these are strategies that would mainly be effective when they are being applied or they are being used to eradicate alien invasive species. Also substitution principles, which would be principles that promote pesticides with lesser toxic and non-chemical alternatives. It also has a review of existing registrations. Waste management is also included for emptying containers or herbicide containers, and also herbicides with absolute chemicals there. DAFF is also responsible for herbicide container management. So if any project gets to use herbicides, it is mainly not their responsibility to use or to dispose containers. It's the responsibility of DFF to do that, according to Section 4. So there's also a herbicide species spreadsheet, which is basically depicting or used for the invasive alien plants control. It also includes Cara and Nimbus species, or that is species that fall under those acts. And on the spreadsheet, there's about 424 species that are listed. There's 14 treatment methods that have been outlined, which are considered to be used or advised to be used. It also contains 31 formulations. There's 53 herbicides as well, and then 13 biopesticides with 3 herbicide categories that are listed on the spreadsheet. And this is maybe an example of how the pesticide spreadsheet looks like. So just to make an example with the first one, the species name being Antacantha, belonging to Acacia genus, and size class being a young species. And then the treatment methods that are advised according to the spreadsheet would be foliar spraying, and then the herbicide are located or registered to be used for that, for the treatment of that particular species. Picloram containing that amount of grams per liters there. And then the dosage is also depicted. And then we have with the kind of dye it is there, and also the dosage that would be included in that particular herbicide. And then estimated product liters per hectare being 1.5, and then you have a volume of mix of that product given there. I'll now give over to my colleague to speak more on the herbicides. Thank you.
Thank you. Afternoon again. I'll take over from the one-stop shop of alien invasive control. So the safety, regarding the safety aspect of the control of these invasive species, we've seen a need, employment, and visibility of health and safety officers. figure out, apologies. So, safety expert, we've seen the need to employ and visibility of more health and safety officers. We give toolbox talks for participants in the field. We work very closely with UCT researchers on herbicide toxicity. We're also looking into PPE, updating our PPE policy, trying to align it with the FAO guidelines and regulations. Lastly, self-assessments and compliance. Challenges that we're still faced with. There's still a high rate of foliar applications, which is very labor intensive. Also there's other risks such as drift and so on. Staff wearing PPE incorrectly or recommendation of incorrect PPE. Herbicide companies, another problem is herbicide companies not being truly transparent in regards to adjuvants in aquatic registered pesticides. There's always room for improvement in regards to everything. So we're looking at measures to mitigate risks, the ongoing research that I mentioned before with UCT researchers. We're trying to implement whatever suggestions they come up with in mitigating risk exposures of pesticides. Awareness of potential risk of pesticides, not only in this setup as people that work with them every day, but also to communities and general public. So awareness measures would be creating pamphlets that can be disposed or given out in communities, churches and all that setup. And lastly, alternative measures such as running away from the dependence of chemicals and moving towards biocontrol and I'll say more natural measures. Implementation of hierarchy of controls, I'll go into depth more on that. And environment, social risk assessments are important as per adjuvant ingredient, not just per herbicide that you decide on. And then leaning more towards bio-based, as I said before, buffer zones, and running away from reliance of chemicals overall. So what we have done, using the hierarchy of controls, so you take your pesticides and you try to move from the top to bottom. Eliminate it totally. If it's toxic, found to be carcinogenic, all that my colleague has mentioned. We'll try substitute with safer pesticides and engineering controls and so on. Background on what Debbie Muir has done and worked on continuously. So far, she's managed to eliminate, using the hierarchy of controls and precautionary principle, she's managed to eliminate 5 pesticides, substituted 6 pesticides, the famous one, Balon and Diesel, Herbicide. And we're currently still working on engineering controls, which is working with the industry to try to change their formulations and move to more safer alternatives. Taking steps to mitigate risks and their impacts through biomonitoring of participants in the field, also environmental and social risks assessments, and lastly, PPE. Okay, here, this is an International Code of Conduct on Pest Management guideline and regulations. It gives an overall guidance on managing pesticides from cradle to the grave in a safe manner. It can be downloaded here, easy to work through. To highlight, and overall, it's important to look at the species spreadsheet, the one-stop shop that we mentioned earlier, when choosing the species you want to control. Secondly, a registered herbicide for that species. Ensure that you use the hierarchy of controls for each species to try and mitigate your human and environmental risks, and do your risk assessment. Very important. So here, it's just to highlight, everyone has been going on about progress. So the number of registered herbicides to control, but you have to be particular to which pesticide that you're choosing to use. So in this case, if I would choose Confront, it wouldn't be a good idea if my team members, participants are females, because you can see that it's reproductive, toxic, and may cause damage to unborn children. So if you've got female participants in the field, this wouldn't be the best option. So what I'm highlighting here is that you choose your pesticide according to your environment and human and social risk assessment. Same goes with cacti. Only one pesticide is used for cacti that don't have biocontrol. But we're winning with this one, a lot of biocontrol this year. Thank you. And question time.
Question time. Now we pass the baton over to Debbie for the questions.
Well done, ladies, for our green Ziphozonke. Let's give them a hand. Okay, questions? Gentleman from Sandy.
Thank you, David, for the presentation. I'm just so much excited to hear that there's a proposed paradigm shift from those toxic chemicals to some other means. I would like to know the first initiative that you have taken to invest in the environmentally friendly concepts like biological control that has been emphasized, which I think you support as well. Have you tried to push the chunk of the budget to say, hey, come up, so that we get away with the chemicals?
Yes, you will see from the presentation that the amount of pesticides the department has used over the last 10 years has been reduced by about 50–60%. And with aquatic weeds, we no longer do full dose sprays. The strategy has been changed to sublethal sprays. So we actually no longer do any full dose chemical sprays on aquatic weeds anymore. We do sublethal sprays, and we don't actually kill the plants, by the way. The sublethal spray, and we actually did a scientific study through Rhodes University CBC to find out what the LD50 was of megamelis, which is 8 grams per liter. And we reduced our sublethal spray of Kilomax, which is a glyphosate, taloamine-free glyphosate, by the way, so there's no toxicity to the aquatic environment. We reduced it down to 2.1 kilograms per hectare, which is now below the LD50 of Megamelus. So we don't kill the biocontrol agents, and we actually increase the sugar content of the water hyacinth plants to attract the biocontrol agents to the water hyacinth plants. So it's actually, in the end, the biocontrol that kills the water hyacinth, not the sublethal spray. So the herbicide is actually just there to increase the sugar content of the water hyacinth plant to attract the biocontrol agents. So we've done a full paradigm shift to use pesticides to attract biocontrol agents, which some people think can't happen, but we actually, using some hazard criterions through the GHS and some scientific research, we actually managed to change the whole paradigm shift. So it is possible, and our whole emphasis is to get as many invasive species under biocontrol as possible. That's why you'll see on my last slide, you don't spray anything onto any plant that has a biocontrol agent. And that is our new policy in the department. If it has biocontrol, you don't spray it.
Just follow up a comment. Yeah, we have got high diversity in terms of environmental conditions in South Africa. You know, we move from west to south, from south to north, east, west, and all those. So just to check whether probably the new adjustment is fitting, sort of a blanket shift. So isn't there anywhere where you pick some context-based challenges that we would say, here this is what works, this adjustment will work only under these conditions, or probably within these parameters of the environmental conditions? I'll give you an example. There's some certain performance change of certain biocontrol from west. In the Western Cape, they perform so much well. But as we come to the Northern Cape, especially with prosopis, I think history says there was a release of biological control that probably not 100% field, probably the recruitment was much faster than the performance of the species that was released. So really the conditions were quite different. Whereas the performance of the biological control in the Western Cape, for instance, the wheatfields, they were doing much better. They suppressed the production of the seeds and the reproduction of the species, thereby suppressing the population recruitment. So the question is context business of the adjustments.
Yes, my statement was a sweeping statement, so yes, it will be context-based. So another example is a ceria on lantana, for instance, and the dacinura on the black wattle, for instance. Certain circumstances we can just leave the black wattle to the flower bud border and we don't need to do any more spraying, but in certain instances we have to do an integrated approach to assist the biocontrol. Remember I said we will do sublethal sprays to assist the biocontrol. So we are going to assist biocontrol, so we're trying to do sprays to assist biocontrol and not sprays to kill, and I'm only talking certain species here, I'm not talking every single invasive species. Because with certain invasive species it's not going to work. We've worked out for aquatic weeds like water hyacinth, it will work. That we can do a sublethal to increase the sugar contents and the biocontrol will then sink the max. But we have to do the research for other species to see if that sort of model will work on other species. So I'm not saying that we will, release Algarobius and Altumius for prosopis in the Northern Cape and then just leave it because we think it's going to work. You're going to have to put the science in behind that before we do that for any other species. So we're looking at that first, but we've done the research for water hyacinth, so we've implemented that strategy for water hyacinth. But we're far away with any other terrestrial species because the synergies for the terrestrial species are different to the synergies for the aquatic species. So you need to know that it's a different kettle of fish when you're talking terrestrial species. So we're going to have to do a lot more research into the terrestrial species before we make a statement like that terrestrial.
Question from Nico?
Debbie, it's just a comment. Us as the Northern Cape also deal with aquatics in large part of our system, the whole system. And this integrated process that Debbie is talking about has a huge impact on our system. We have started off in 2012 where I'm going to use the word dumped 12,000 litres of glyphosate in that system just to get the hyacinth under control. And through this process, partnership with Rhodes University, we established biocontrol reserves next to estuaries on the river, whereby you would get reed banks and partially at the back you can start breeding biocontrol agents. And since 2015, no area application, nothing has been taking place in that river when it comes to chemicals. Biocontrol has integrated into that process and it's currently being maintained. It's only high tide of the year when it's very hot, December, January, when the hyacinth actually starts growing too fast for the biocontrol to catch up. But then the teams will just come in and do spot sprays and it will catch us up. But that whole system currently maintains itself by the introducing of biocontrol in that system. The only bad thing about it is, as soon as you take the one thing out, you take the hyacinth out, submerged aquatics comes in. We've got spike water morpho in the system. I know Rhodes are busy with looking at biocontrol agents for it. But yeah, I mean, when you take one problem out and the next problem comes in. But yeah, the integrated process does work for us as well.
Thank you, Nico. Any other questions or comments? In front, Stian?
I don't know, Mike, let's see Facebook's face.
Everybody else wants to listen to this.
I know, thank you. Debbie, just a quick one. Maybe it's not the right program for this. In the budget allocations, why don't we only allow 10 million for forestry? If you think how much forestry is spreading out of chemical areas, just the Western Cape, are there any reason for only 10 million for forestry? I mean, is that a...
You're asking the wrong person because that's my same question I ask all the time. I always say maybe we should, yes, but no comment. It's rather say no comment.
Yes, hello, I'm Donnie from MacMac Agri. We just want to know, is there any way we can, do any, how can I say, is there any herbicides available for surplus and how can we get assistance for herbicides?
Okay, yes. If you looked at my table, you would have seen the best one to use. Okay, let me start off with stop cutting prosopis. Stop cutting prosopis. Because I'm going to say this in Afrikaans, die groeiknol, the growth point for prosopis is under the ground. So unless you're going to dig the thing out, it's always going to carpus. So stop cutting it and do a basal application. I worked very hard to get you a substitute for garland and diesel. It's called Turbador. 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 It is a basal application. It works exactly the same as garland and diesel. You apply it exactly the same as garland and diesel, and you will stop killing the geophytes and everything else in the Northern Cape. It is an environmentally safe application that I did a substitution and elimination for the garland and diesel in the Northern Cape. That's your first option. If you're wanting to do an aerial application in really big infestations, Sendero. Sendero. Those are your two options which are environmentally safe in the Northern Cape. And then you got, yes, and I know the whole thing about the trees now dead and then standing. What about cutting it down and either providing the local community with firewood, or you can cut it down and make charcoal, or you can cut it down and make briquettes, etc., etc. But do not collect the peeler, the seed pods, and feed it to your sheep, because you are just going to disperse the seeds and make more infestations of prosopis all over the province. So please don't distribute prosopis further by feeding the seed pods to your sheep. Does that answer your question? Herbicide assistance, you will see the little man or the not so little man sitting behind you on your left-hand side, Nico Baileveld. That is where you would request herbicide assistance.
Sorry, Debbie, I'm a bit confused by this slide. If you're saying that Turbidor has no environmental effects, as I see that slide, Garlon has environmental effects, and Turbidor seems to have exactly the same environmental effects. I'm assuming that the slide is incorrect. But if you...
Mitigation measures. Remember I said that is the active ingredient in the pesticide that is on there. So you have to now, as part of your hierarchy of control, implement your mitigation measures as part of your risk assessment when you put your management plan together. So how, as you're doing a basal application, how would you mitigate against those measures? Because remember, you are doing a basal application. So instead of spraying it out of a knapsack sprayer as a basal application, if it is a hazard criterion 8, persistent in soil, water, soil absorption, harmful to aquatic life with long-lasting effects, how would you mitigate against that? You paint it on. So you don't have any wastage and you don't have any getting into the soil. So you don't spray it on with a knapsack, so you don't have drift, you don't have overspray, you don't have wastage. Mitigation measures, people, mitigation measures. You've got hazard criterion 5, developmental and reproductive tox for Turbidor, okay? So who's going to spray it on? Not a woman. So then your applicators will have to be men, not women. There's your mitigation measure for your Turbidor application onto your stump. Mitigation measure. You ensure that your applicator is not female. The next one is hazard criterion 2, acute tox to mammals and birds. HO3 is inhalation risk. So how do you mitigate against the inhalation risk? Half-face respirator. So you cover your mouth and your nose. Mitigate it against your inhalation risk. H317 and H319 is respiratory irritant and respiratory sensitizer, which means, again, inhalation risk. Again, half-face respirator. Mitigate risk mitigated if you're wearing a half-face respirator when you're applying your Turbidor. H373 is dermal risk. In other words, you can't get it on your skin. How do you mitigate against dermal risk? You wear a long sleeve shirt. Does that answer your question, Philip?
Yes, then why can't you apply Garlon with the same methodology? It seems to have exactly the same environmental impact. It's just, maybe it's a confusing slide for me, so...
okay, because I didn't have an hour to do all of this, but Garlon is a butoxyethyl ester, which means it volatilizes at temperatures of 25 degrees and above, which means you cannot spray it out of a knapsack sprayer because it's going to volatilize into the air. So then, how do you mitigate against a volatile pesticide? Because it's going to fall out of the air, it's going to fall on your head, it's going to fall on everywhere. You can't see it, you can't smell it, it's volatile. Terbinafine has a slightly different formulation. It's not a butoxyethyl ester, it's a triclopyr triethylene amine salt, which means it's not volatile, it's still a triclopyr, but it's a triethylene amine salt. So the formulation of the active ingredient is different, which means it's not as environmentally toxic or environmentally risky as Garlan. So Garlan is more risky for environmental and human health exposure than Terbinafine is. And Terbinafine is more environmentally risky because its carrier, adjuvant, co-formulant, whatever you want to call it, is diesel. Whereas Terbinafine is formulated in a vegetable oil, which I couldn't all fit on the slide and I didn't have an hour to explain.
Debbie, maybe you can, for sake of clarification, what you didn't touch on was the change in the legislation and the packaging which has to happen by the end of the year.
Yes, sorry, the GHS, the Global Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling, has been amended globally that every country has to implement it in their country. Now, our implementation of the GHS in South Africa is called the HCS, the Harmonized Hazardous Chemical Agents Regulations, which were promulgated in March last year, which now forces our government to implement the GHS in this country. So all chemical labels by October this year will have to have GHS labeling on, which means all of that you see there will have to be on the chemical labels, plus the hazard pictograms, the hazard statements, the hazard notices, the hazard signal words, etc., etc. So all of that there will have to be on all the chemical labels by October this year. So the HCA has been, the GHS has been implemented in South Africa as the HCA. And let's say the implementing department is the Department of Employment and Labour under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I'm here all day if you want to talk to me further, because I think I'm running way over my time.
It's fine. This is, we have another question over this. Oh, sorry, back to Nico. No, this is very important stuff. We can spend time on this because the changes in the legislation one needs to know, because in future you'll be able to read what are the mitigating circumstances or the procedures you've got to put into place when applying these chemicals that you might not have known about beforehand. So what is the protective gear? Is what face mask is required? Must it be a full overall? Can the person apply it with a t-shirt? And we've never really had access to that information. So this is vitally important to talk about. Nico?
Debbie, please, we as a region are going to need your assistance regarding herbicide assistance. The fundings that we received as ring friends for all our suppliers and contractors and service providers. So there's no additional funding for herbicide assistance currently in our Northern Cape budget. Could you maybe take it up with the director to allocate funds towards us for assisting herbicide landowners?
Will do.
We had a question there from the gentleman.
Thank you. I think what the gentleman and around maybe private developers wanted to know. Do we have the documentation that can help private developers, private properties that can afford specialists or can report has PCO to say that there's a documentation with a list of species and a list of herbicides that they need to use to control for those plants they want to control. Do we have something to help them out that they can just download from the website, download from anywhere, and then they can use that they know that they need to use Tembani or sort of example?
It's in the EP pesticide policy, it's in the herbicides and pesticides document. All that information is available. I've given it to Kay, so she will put it into a pack for you. You can also talk to Valdu, your Valdu, because he's also got it all.
Yeah, I'll put myself that you have, but I'm asking that from the guy from he actually wanted to know, like, what herbicide we use for platform. I might have the platform, but other people might not have the platform. So, I was actually referring from what he was asking, because he might have other species that he doesn't know what to control.
Okay, Kay will circulate the EP pesticide policy, the spreadsheet I was referring to, the herbicides and pesticides, which gives you, it basically gives you that, not that. No? I'm going the wrong way. No, sorry. It basically gives you that. So it gives you the chemical class, it gives you the herbicide, and it gives you all the HCAs per herbicide. So then you can use that. But remember people, in the pesticide spreadsheet, I'm a specialist scientist. I've done all the risk assessments already. So in the column where it says recommended product, that's the one that I've put through the risk assessment already. So I've already looked at all of this already and recommended the product anyway. So you can go and do your own ESRA, your environmental social risk assessment, and choose it, or you can just be lazy and take the one in the recommended product column.